But we'll just wait until we've got absolute confirmation that the broadcasting into KB is working, and then we can resume. So we can start now. Right. Okay. We are resuming the meeting of the Great Cambridge Partnership in a private room. We were unable to continue without interruption in the chamber. This is still a public meeting, and it is being broadcast to another room within Shire Hall and also to Facebook. So the sound system is now different. There is 2 microphones in the centre of the room, so I think if we speak clearly towards the centre of the room, they will be picked up, the sound will be picked up, and there's also a camera in the corner. So I think it's important, if possible, that we sit sort of within sight of this. So I have confirmation that now that the sound and visuals are now working in the other room. We had got to, we're just starting on item 6, the Citizens' Assembly, and I will invite Suzanne Lansdell to recommence her presentation about what happened. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Aidan. So I'll start from the beginning. So I'm just going to give an overview of the process and some of the findings. I'm joined here today by Sue and Sachin, who are 2 of the Assembly members who took part in the weekends, and we'll hear again from Zara, who recorded some of the presentations she made at the Joint Assembly. She sent her apologies for work commitments changed, which meant that she couldn't be here. And then there's a little video of some of the inputs as well. So just to recap, the Citizens' Assembly was part of the Innovation and Democracy programme, which was funded by the Department of Culture, Media and Sports, and also the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and GCP applied for funding and won funding to put on the Assembly, along with just 2 other councils. And I did want to kind of acknowledge GCP and the council's kind of commitment to do that and to undertake what has now been the start of a kind of deliberative wave across the country, with Citizens' Assemblies really taking hold as a way to involve people in kind of deliberative democracy approaches. So just to remind you on the question. So the question was, how do we reduce congestion, improve air quality and provide better public transport in Greater Cambridge? Just kind of referring back to one of the points that was made earlier, Climate change did weave throughout that, but as Isabel said, GCP are not responsible for climate change in its entirety, but just the transport elements, and it's important that citizens' assemblies come up with recommendations that can be given to an authority that has the ability to make decisions on those points. So in terms of who was involved, and just to kind of recap on what a citizens' assembly is, it's a way of bringing together a randomly selected and representative group of what we call a mini public of an area to learn, deliberate and come to recommendations on the question that has been set. So it's about random selection rather than self-selection. And so we sent out, or the Sortition Foundation sent out 10,000 invitations across the area that you can see there, and that resulted in 60 assembly members, and 53 of whom participated throughout both weekends. So what we're seeking to do in a citizens' assembly is get beyond kind of opinion and come to a judgment, given people the time to hear from experts, consider the issues deeply, learn about them, talk amongst their fellow assembly members before they come up with recommendations. So who we had in the room reflected the gender, age, ethnicity, geography, socioeconomic, travel modes and travel regularity of Greater Cambridge and the wider travel to work area, and that took part over 2 weekends in September and October. I'm not going to go into depth about the process, but just to say that broadly this is what we covered. So day one was about learning about the context and the impacts driven by transport, air quality. Day two was around visions, what's hearing from local stakeholders about their visions for the future, but also hearing about what other parts of the country and other countries have done faced with similar challenges. And then weekend two looked at exploring different measures and the pros and cons of those before on day four coming to recommendations and also developing a set of key messages. So overall we had 18 experts giving inputs, giving witnesses, presenting evidence to the Assembly, and it represented over 1,300 people hours of deliberation. So at the end of the first weekend, one of the things that the Assembly member did was prioritise. So they developed and then prioritised a series of vision outcomes, what they wanted to see achieved in the future. And so just picking up a few at the top there, providing affordable public transport, providing fast and reliable public transport, being environmental and zero carbon, restricting the city centre to only clean and electric vehicles, and being people-centred, prioritising pedestrians and cyclists. So I mentioned on day four that we went through the process of developing some recommendations, and that was done through taking a series of votes which were focusing on different aspects of the question that we had. So the first one there around what would be your preferred way of reducing congestion and creating road space. I'm just going to click through these, I'll just focus on one of them in a minute. What would be your preferred way of improving air quality in Greater Cambridge? What would be your preferred way of raising funds for improved public and active transport in Greater Cambridge across the wider area? And then vote 4 was slightly different. We asked people across the range of kind of core measures to what extent they supported or opposed them. And that resulted in a slightly spaghetti-like diagram. What you see there, and sort of what we saw consistently across, was that closing roads to cars came out with the strongest support, with their 30 Assembly members giving it strong support. But also that clean air zone, flexible charge, pollution charge also commanding quite a high level of support there. So in terms of closing roads to cars, 91% of Assembly members supported or strongly supported that. But all of the other measures, except for workplace parking levy and increased parking charges, all received more than 70% support or strongly support. So So quite a high indication of action wanted. And then on the fifth vote, we said, okay, given all of the measures, what would be your preferred way? And again, you can see there that closing roads to cars came out top, but the other sort of charging mechanisms relatively, a kind of bunch of three there. So as well as asking about those core measures, those kind of hard measures, we also worked with Assembly members. They generated their own ideas about what supporting measures, what else would you want to see in place to move to address the Assembly question. And so there you see top was coming the mayor to franchise the buses, planting trees and hedges, promotion of electric bikes, and the lollipop bus service, which was this kind of implementation of a more orbital route around Cambridge, and also long distance buses using a park and ride, so that they were kind of captured there and then brought into Cambridge through different options. So in terms of sort of overall conclusions that we would draw from that, is that there was a clear desire for action and ambition. Road closures across the board was the most popular choice if you looked at all the voting options, and the road charging options in different forms follow from there. Increased parking charges were most strongly opposed and least strongly supported, and workplace parking levy, as I mentioned, was not also well supported. And no intervention, so there was an option of no intervention, received the least number of preferences in all of the votes. And as I said before about the supporting measures, that's just a recap there in terms of the mayor's franchise buses, planting electric bikes being the most supported measures. After we'd done the voting and that had been presented back to the Assembly, we asked Assembly members to think about what key messages they wanted to give back to GCP. And this is sort of a kind of compilation and snapshot of that. I think it was referred to before. One of the key messages which consistently came across was about being brave, be bold, and take action. A real sense that improvements in public transport need to come first, and especially if there is any charging element put in place, and that funding from any charging scheme needs to be ring-fenced for transport in Greater Cambridge. The need for better integration and coordination of transport across Greater Cambridge. A kind of key principle which kept on coming up throughout the groups was about fairness, and making sure that any measures takes account of different income levels, different reasons to travel. Exemptions for whether it be access or charging for essential services and essential users, and a real sense that, let's be the best and let's make Cambridge number one. I think the kind of corollary for that being, if we don't do something, will Cambridge start to suffer, really suffer as a result of this? A sense that let's progress on the immediate actions first, and those that improve Greater Cambridge's environment, and also a sense from the Assembly about ongoing kind of transparency and monitoring and feedback. What's being done, what sort of effect is it having, and feedback particularly to the Assembly members, but also I think a sense to the wider Cambridge community about what's happening, what's being progressed. So just to finish, there was an independent evaluation done which hasn't completely reported yet, but I just took a snapshot from this. So people were asked whether they agreed with the recommendations put forward to GCP, and there you can see sort of a high level of support. I think there's 77% of people strongly agreeing with the recommendations that have come forward. So I think now we'll be hearing from Zara. Magically. say there were two kind of videos that were to get up. One which was the recording that Zara gave to the Joint Assembly a couple of weeks ago of her experiences, and then secondly we had a filmmaker at the Assembly, so a little short film of that process, which enables you to hear from some of the other Assembly members as well.
Yes, yes. So one or two. I mean, if you'd like to ask anything at this point about what John in.
I appreciate you've not quite done all the feedback from the Assembly used to evaluating that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Having those 60 people come through it, I wonder how many would recommend it, not necessarily about the same subject, but would they recommend it to other organisations and other issues? So in the evaluation, have we asked or could we ask or what?
Okay, so an organisation called Renaissance was evaluating the 3 IIDP programme assemblies that happened. So I think we could look across those 3 for sure. I think generally what we're seeing, and this is sort of an observation from an organisation that does this, is that absolutely they are being used for different topics. So climate is absolutely one that is that lends itself to a citizens' assembly. The citizens' assemblies are not right for all issues, so where they're good is where you have a trade-off, a difficult decision to make, and that garnering the views of a wider group of representative public, the mini-public, is a way to hear what their recommendations are doing. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying to create the ideal environment for people to kind of learn and consider those issues with people who, from a mini public from that area. So absolutely, they're being taken up quite a lot now. Just referring to another point that was made earlier, so far in the UK, and I think it will probably stay like this, they're complementary to our existing kind of democracy systems and a kind of useful help to that. There are other countries that have them as binding recommendations, so Poland being one example, but certainly in the UK that hasn't been the case.
We can play the video now.
Yes, we're ready to play.
So that was a bit of a rattle through, but I thought it was useful now to hear from Zara. And I've got just some questions that we've been through, which I'll ask. Is that okay? So Zara, why did you decide to take part in the Citizens' Assembly?
I got the invite. It came through my door randomly, and it struck my attention that this is about Cambridge. I love Cambridge. I've lived in Cambridge since year 2000. It's my home, so it attracted me. But also, I was part of the Addenbrooke's consultation. I work on the site, so I have an idea.
Okay, yes, okay. You can see that we have members of the audience who are flapping to, if you could get slightly closer
Yes.
to the microphone.
Okay.
Please don't be intimidated. They're just desperately desperately keen to hear what you have to say. So.
I was just saying that I got the invite through my door, and it's about Cambridge. I love Cambridge. It's my home, so I literally just opted in immediately. I got the invite. But also I was part of the Addenbrooke's public consultation of the biomedical campus. So I had a little idea of possibly what it would look like.
So Zara, how did you find the experience? Was it as you expected?
No, actually I was very surprised because it was so different from the other consultations I've been to on the basis of the Addenbrooke's site. This was, when we came on the first day, when we realized we were only 50-something in the room, we were all a bit shocked. It couldn't possibly be just us. So it was explained to us that we were chosen on a basis of a certain criteria. So it was exciting, but it also drummed home the responsibility that was put on us, because I was representing some very important criteria and important people out there. So it made us sat up and realize that we have something very important and probably very pioneering to be part of here.
So what did you get out of taking part in the assembly?
It was an honor to be part of something as big as that, to actually be representing a certain category at a level, that would truly make an impact to people's life. I'm a nurse by background, so it's important to me that, I see lots of sick people coming to the hospital. So the presentation by the gentleman there was very, very pertinent. I know families and friends who have become sick. I also developed asthma, along the way, living in Cambridge. So it was something that I believe that hopefully when we did a good job, it might address issues properly. So to me, that is a big takeaway.
So having been through that, what do you hope will happen to the conclusions now?
Well, your slide have said it loud and clear, and I will just reiterate that. We all agreed unanimously. I could remember on the day in the room, we all shouted out, we want it done as we did it. It's a lot of our time and effort that we put in there. And we took the time to talk to others. You asked us to talk to others and find out some more. So we believe we represented the community really well. So we think that what we brought to the table should be taken seriously by those that can do something about it.
And just finally, what struck you most about what you heard at this assembly? Was there any sort of standout?
Yes. The presentation by the economist, she's there at the back of the room. She showed us a video that showed the overview of Cambridge from 7 o'clock in the morning till somewhere around 10 o'clock. And it showed us how the traffic troops into Cambridge, and with it, how the climate changed. The density of the pollution was just visible. We're just gobsmacked, really. We couldn't believe that this was really happening around us, but it made sense and correlates with all the conditions we are seeing as well. So that was quite a striking moment for all of us there, I think.
Thanks, Zara. So I think we've now got...
I'm Bethany, and I'm from Witchford, which is out Ely way.
Hello there, I'm Vaughan, and I'm based just off Mill Road in Cambridge.
My name is Zara, and I live off Histon Road, Darwin Drive, Cambridge City.
So my name's Nikki, and I live in East Chesterton.
I kind of thought there'd be a lot more of them talking, people talking to us and saying, these are the ideas we have, and then we'd have to sort of give our opinions on them. So I'm quite pleased to see that instead we're giving our opinions and we're the ones sort of deciding what's best for our areas. They're actually taking into consideration what we know about what's going on.
I wasn't too sure what to expect. I just knew that we were going to be talking about various subjects. And then I wasn't too sure at all when I heard we'd only be discussing 3 areas. Why weren't we including things like climate change or what have you? But then I began to realise that it was actually a good thing limiting us just to 3 areas, because as you start to combine everybody's wants and needs in those, it becomes a terribly complicated problem to try and solve.
So I expected there to be sort of more debate and differences of opinion, but actually people are very much on the same page. Everybody is agreeing that we need to sort out congestion, and everyone agrees that we need to improve our air quality. There's a good level of understanding of the issues, and obviously people have different ideas about how we do that, but in terms of whether we need to do that, everybody is in agreement that it's an important issue that needs to be sorted.
It's been actually surprisingly fulfilling, let's put it that way, because we are getting to the end and we seem to have, have gotten to some kind of definite, we're beginning to see this morning a definite direction in which we are going.
I think it's interesting how they managed to get such a wide variety of people to come and discuss things, but also the experts. They've got different experts talking about different things. That's everything you need to hear and consider.
I'm just glad to be part of a citizens' assembly that is helping to change things in Cambridge. That is the bottom line for me. It wasn't too important for me that my personal voice come out of it. So, but I'm glad that I was here, and I feel like I've had the opportunity to contribute to, changes that we'll hopefully start to see. Some of them maybe very quickly, within a year or so, we begin to feel the impact of some of the things that has come up here. So that's hugely more important than maybe a personal voice that I may have come here with at the initial stage.
Citizens' assemblies do have value, but they would have even more value if they were binding, so that the local authorities, etc., actually had to enact the recommendations that came out of them. At the moment, the ones that I've heard of in the UK have just been advisory, and although they do have some value, they could just end up as a report in the bottom of a filing cabinet, and that would be a great shame. I think they have the capacity to become a really valuable tool in our democracy.
Thank you very much. It's really good.
Yes, I'm going to continue.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I'll see if any comments from the table.
Sorry. The first action is about the franchise issue, okay? I think it's important to put on record that there is already a review being undertaken by the combined authority, and that is one of the issues which is currently being looked at. So I think that's important actually to feed some of that back to the people that came to the assembly. And the second one is what I call the top of the pops type of one, which is the close the roads. Okay, and for historical, and I talk from Cambridgeshire County Council's point of view, we have closed roads in the past in the centre. You can't drive through the middle of Cambridge. I used to, I should say about 40 odd years ago, drive right way through the middle and park anywhere I wanted actually at the time. So we have historically actually closed roads. So I think it'd be very interesting to see how that debate goes about which roads and what impact that might have on the businesses within there. So I think that's important to say when you look at what came out as the high thing, which is the closure of roads. I think it would be very key for Cambridge County Council to be very interested in seeing how that would develop and offer some assistance in which roads that might be. Important statement, I appreciate, not so much of a question.
Lewis.
Well, just following up on Ian's point, I think there is definitely a threat of this proposals to close roads to cars. Good or bad schemes can be done on that. I don't know whether, I really just trying to get a little bit more of granularity. Was there any particular focus there? Because we can't easily close main roads, but responding to Ian's point, I'm concerned that people can still, thankfully it's not many, navigate all the way through the city centre pretending that they're going down that road for access. So certainly when we talk about things later in the agenda, there is definitely a value in looking at short-term measures of actually enhancing the cordon scheme, because it has made a real difference. But yeah, so my question on that was, what did they think they meant when they were talking about that? Because it's something that both Ian and I endorse and think could be taken further. The other part, which hasn't really had a lot of discussion, is the role of public transport, because clearly we are a cycling city and can do better, including for cyclists and people walking. But what's the story that came from them about where do buses fit in and what were some of the problems and challenges they had, because in coming up with these interventions, there isn't as much in some of the coverage exactly about how they would spend money that was raised.
Okay, so I think that it's fair to say, and Isabel, you might want to, I can't talk about the kind of content and what you're going to do with that, but it's fair to say that we were looking at the measures as, so we didn't go down to granularity in terms of which roads and where. It was more at a principle level. If we're going to deal with this question that's set to the Assembly, then here are a range of kind of policy options or interventions that you can make. And having heard about how the issues and how it's been done in other places, and had an opportunity to question them, where would people vote? So clearly that sounds like that's the next step, right? But I think that if you look within the report, for each of the measures, we also looked at pros and cons around them. So there is, again, it's not down to street names, but it is saying, okay, what are some of the pros and cons, say, of closing roads, say, of some kind of charging scheme. So there's a bit more detail there. I think one thing that I would, coming on to a second point about the role of public transport, and I'm just trying to, which I can't read, go back on to, if you look at the vision, outcomes, affordable, thank you, affordable, fast and reliable public transport was right up there at the top. So there was definitely, my sense was that, that was the priority, but then it was also balancing it, and I think that you'd see that throughout in the report with, okay, well, how do we create the space for fast, reliable transport to happen? So this sense of reallocating road space and the focus towards being people-centred and towards pedestrians and cyclists. So again, public transport, but also pedestrians and cyclists. So I think the Assembly grappled with this challenge of both on the one hand, needing space on the roads to enable public transport to flow freely, but also creating a funding base potentially to look at some of additional measures that might be put in to enhance the existing public transport. So a lot of that detail is more within the detail of the report, where people were looking at pros and cons, I would say. Largely, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, just
I think I'd just add that in terms of the response, that's one of the things that we're going to have to the board is going to have to think about is taking those recommendations and turning them into kind of some proposals, and in doing that might want to think about actually how some of the principles from the Citizens' Assembly, in terms of involving people in that, how we might do that in terms of kind of taking the next steps as well.
Yes, Tim.
Can I just add a rider to that, because we do have Edward Lee in the room, and he did make a presentation on what he calls a lollipop bus service, and it's not necessarily the exact answer, but it's worth saying that in the feedback session from each of the tables, the lollipop bus system was actually a very popular item. So the principles underlying that, particularly easy interchanges between radials and not having all the passengers going into the city centre, is something perhaps the board should pay close attention to.
Sorry, yes, so of course if you look at the supporting measures which are referred to before, the lollipop bus services is up there as fourth point. And then this idea about managed and coordinated transport as well, scored quite highly in terms of vision statement.
Thank you very much. I found the last session where people were reporting back, sort of going into some of the sort of what they really meant by these high-level policy responses was really interesting, and yes, the road closures thing was much more about the making better use of the space that we've got, allocating in terms of allocating space for public transport and cycling, but also just improving the space, making it more attractive and pleasant, and especially in the city centre, so which was, I think, really striking how strongly that came through. Yes, and I hope we will be able to get back to the Assembly with good response over the summer. Yes, so before we just get on to recommendations, I just want to, so Claire Ruskin, who's not able to be here, sent a few comments on this point. She said that she supports the recommendations and in particular notes the strong support for action to reduce congestion, improve air quality and provide better public transport. So if there are no more comments, I think we can move on to the recommendations, which are on page 29. I'll get to them. So we are being asked to obviously thank the Citizens Assembly.
That's sitting here.
Yes, thank the Citizens Assembly, including those present and the organisers. That's really kind of you to come. I mean, noting your report and the recommendations, which are, I think, will really help us shape what we're doing in the future on congestion, air quality, and better public transport, and among other things, note the really strong support for action to address these issues, and then we will discuss and decide now whether to agree to bring a more detailed response back to the Citizens Assembly's recommendations by the summer, and also sort of plan to give regular feedback on progress. So is everyone happy with those recommendations?
Yes.
Good?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. So now we have the public transport improvements and city access strategy. We have we have 3 public questions, I believe. We have not everyone for the public questions in the room.
If those that have just been here for city access have to exit,
Citizens Assembly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was good to talk to you.
I'll take the round up.
Apologies for this.
So if those folk want to go and take into a room, then they can continue. And in the meantime, I'll get the others questions.
We've got a spare chair here.
So there's enough space for 3 or 4 then.
Yeah.
There's 3 questions on that.
And then there won't be any further presentations.
There's a presentation for city access
For city access.
after the public
Other
questions.
questions. So we'll just bear yes.
You can block the door. Yeah, you can block that door. Okay.
Come in and then I'll let the door close. Cheers.
Where is it?
Yeah, just
Thank you very much. So we've now got to the point of the public questions, the sort of the first part of this item. Just to explain, there are 2 microphones in the centre of the room that are then being used to broadcast the audio on Facebook and to set them. So, first of all, to your Vincent, I presume, yes. So if you could ask for a question, that would be very kind, and we'll respond. Thank you.
So my name is Vincent Poole, and I'm asking a question on behalf of the Arbury Road East Residents Association. This is a residents association constituted of the households living on Arbury Road and its tributary roads. Our residents association is constituted of the households living on Arbury Road and its tributaries between the Cambridge North Academy and Milton Road. We live along a neighbourhood road that has become a rat run. Cars either sit and queue, poisoning the air, or they speed. well in excess of the 20 mph limit. The ongoing Eastern Road works are poised to make this situation much worse. Much worse. Incoming traffic will ignore the signed diversion route and it will race down Arby Road only to get stuck at the Northern Road traffic signals. As a residents group, we welcome the findings of the City Access Strategy and the Joint Assembly recommendations regarding it. In particular, paragraph 12.4 recommends piloting further road closures, both in the city centre and on local roads. And a pilot community closure scheme could be developed to offer communities the opportunity to come forward with proposals for local roads. For example, play streets, pocket parks, or closures around schools, of which there are many on Arby Road. Well, here we are. Arby Road residents are here. We know from a recent survey which we conducted that those who live on Arby Road are ready and willing to try pilot schemes, to test ideas, and to participate in workshops to develop proposals that will stop rat running, which will reduce pollution and which will bring our community together once again. You will receive our eager support for exploring serious options. And my question is, will the Executive Board support Part C of the recommendations and then add Arby Road East to the list of immediate intervention sites to address issues of congestion, air quality and carbon emissions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, really interesting question. Thank you very much, Lee. What I think we're better to do is have all those questions and then we'll come back to our officers to respond to them all, if that's okay. But yeah, thank you. Excellent. So for the cycling campaign, are you Matthew, going to ask this one? Thank you very much.
Just a quick point of order. I'm sorry, I know this has been an extraordinary meeting.
Yes.
And I may have missed something in all the shuffle. Could I obtain a statement that this is a legal meeting according to the Open Government Protocol from the Chair?
Yes, I've been advised that it is. Yes, I'm confident that it is. I mean, we were made absolutely sure that anyone in the public could view the meeting before we commence.
Thank you very much for this. That's all. I do want to say that I really enjoyed the video of this the Citizens Assembly. I think that was amazing. So thank you very much for that. And the question itself, my name is Matthew Danish. I'm a trustee of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign. So we thank those involved for the research conducted on the City Access project. It's clear that both the scientific evidence and public opinion support the goal of switching to a significant number of journeys in and around Cambridge to walking, cycling, and public transport. It's also clear that this needs to be done to address issues of congestion, air quality, and climate change, and to deliver an economically thriving region of healthy, happy people. We strongly support the cycling proposals included in the list of short-term interventions, including plans to build more cycle infrastructure, improve junctions, trial car-free days, develop a lease scheme for e-bikes and cargo cycles, improve and increase cycle parking, and work with schools and businesses to increase levels of cycling. We also strongly support the piloting of further modal filters and community streets. These measures are essential to the growth of cycling in the area for all ages and abilities. However, we believe that the implementation of these should not depend on the resources of local communities only, and would like to ask the GCP to develop a coordinated plan of modal filters that makes transport work for the whole city and could be supported by additional demand measures if necessary. Finally, we call for bold and timely action. Around us, other UK cities are taking the lead. London, York, Bristol, Birmingham, Brighton, and Oxford. When will Cambridge join the list? In Europe, Paris has grown cycling by 54% in just 1 year. Again, the circulation plan led to 25% of the residents switching away from driving. So we'd like to ask the Greater Cambridge Partnerships Executive Board when they will begin to improve city access, and how will they communicate the plans in a way that engages people in a citywide transformation. rather than focusing on street-by-street changes. And just in addition, I'd like to say I think this is the most important project of the ones you have. So I really, really hope that this will lead to some good recommendations soon. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Matthew. Again, really excellent question. Yes, last sentence, we'll get a lot of support. So, and then the third question for this item is from Edward Lee. Would you be able to come? You can come next to Phil there. We're not using the projector at the moment.
Isn't that why I won't be on my camera?
Oh, I think Boris can turn it.
Should we turn the projector on?
It's going to be used next, but I think Edward's sitting to the left of it.
It's not blinding you. No, go fine. Good.
Okay, so thank you. So I think the summary from the Joint Assembly's deliberations neatly encapsulates where we're at. The evidence presented to members provided a compelling case to do something, although it was not yet clear what that something was. It does seem that GCP is trapped in a vicious circle of requiring revenue to fund expansion of bus services, but lacking the political consensus and popular trust to introduce a congestion charge or a flexible charge to raise that revenue. I do think that there is a way out, though, and that is through implementing workplace parking levy. I think this has been undersold by officers to members, and I think a reconsideration of potential and the pros and cons actually could lead to the conclusion that it is the way to break out of the vicious cycle, and it's the first step towards building that revenue stream that's essential to be able to fund the expansion of bus services in the long term. Scotland recently passed legislation to allow cities, starting with Edinburgh and Glasgow, to introduce WPL, workplace parking levy. Oxford, with the active support of Oxford University, Leicester, 3 London boroughs are proposing to introduce a WPL. I believe also Cardiff is as well to add to that list. Of your report, if you turn to page 61, paragraph 9.22, I think you'll see there that WPL has only been accessed either in isolation or in conjunction with an increase in general parking, on-street parking fares. I see it as being the first step of a sequence of steps that would lead to some form of flexible congestion charging. But I think politically and practically, this is an easier route, this is an easier way in, because it is easier to tailor charge to make sure that it has an equitable impact, and that's really, really important. And that was really clear from the Citizens' Assembly that the equitable impact is absolutely essential, and the WPL can be tailored more carefully than, say, a congestion charge. I think it's worth also looking at page 73 of the Citizens' Assembly report and looking at page 26 of the Citizens' Assembly report, and looking at the pros and cons that are set out there, some of which the Assembly members believed was kind of erroneously. For instance, they said the money may not be used for other improvements, e.g. electric buses. The Nottingham case, there is statutory support for that money being reinvested. It cannot be spent in other ways. So that that gives reassurance to the public. Things like displacing street residential, that there are quite a lot of schemes that would have that effect, and we need the continued rollout of residence parking zones to counter that. There is no such thing that says no reduction in congestion pollution. That actually is factually untrue. The reduction in Nottingham was initially small, but actually the really significant thing, which has only appeared more recently, is that it is effectively put a cap on the increase. So whereas in other cities traffic growth has increased, in Nottingham it is actually public transport that has absorbed that additional demand to travel. So actually the value has grown over time. And as I say, we can tailor it by, for instance, offering a discount or a rebate for electric parking spaces. So actually we can use this as a mechanism to encourage employers to support electric cars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, really excellent, interesting question. Thank you very much. Could I now ask Isabel, Peter, do you want to kick off with some responses to these?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the Residents' Association, I mean, you bring to life
the challenges that the report is trying to sort of, in its very wordy way, sort of articulate around congestion and impact on communities. Absolutely right that the part of the recommendations in 12.4 are for a short-term package of interventions. I know that officers have spoken to the Residents Association previously. If the recommendation goes through, then we'll be happy to commit to ongoing discussions to see what short-term improvements we could make in discussions with the Residents Association in Albury and indeed in other areas across the city. I think then moving on to Matthew's question around, well, how do we look at the shorter with the more impactful longer-term changes? Further part of the recommendation is asking for us to really explore that and come forward with a series of package options that need to be thought through in terms of deliverability, in terms of phasing, implementation, but also in terms of public engagement and public involvement. We've done an awful lot of work through the Choices for Better Journeys, Citizens Assembly that we've gone through, and actually, public engagement continuing as we develop packages will be an important part of that. I think the issue around workplace levy, the Citizens Assembly interestingly didn't support it. And I think what the paper tries to do is to take an evidential approach. There's an awful lot of information there that weighs the technical and the analytical. And again, outlining what some short-term solutions may be, and we need to work with local stakeholders on that, but also to weigh options and packages for longer-term interventions. And the paper doesn't jump to any solution, be it fiscal or be it physical closures or anything else. What it's saying is actually we need to take a balanced approach and really put forward a number of options that decision makers can then consider as to be most appropriate in our circumstances.
Okay, Marcus, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Now we're going to have a short presentation.
Very short. I'm just going to say a couple of words, and then Isabel's going to do all the hard work. And so just to build on the answer to the question, this is a weighty tone for which we make no apology. There's an awful lot of work gone into this in terms of bringing forward technical analysis, in terms of bringing forward the public engagement, Systems Assembly and the like. Isabel's going to try and bring that to life in a manageable time frame, and then I think we're going to come back to the recommendations at the end.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Great, so as Peter says, the paper pulls together a huge amount of evidence, so I'm just going to briefly go through some of the key points. Starting with the evidence it outlines all the issues in the options. And this will be very familiar to the board from previous papers, particularly in December 2018 and June 2019. So just a quick recap, that essentially congestion is already bad and it's predicted to worsen with growth. We have 44,000 jobs coming to the area over 15 years, and if everyone travels as they do that, that's another 26,000 cars on the road. We've looked at the impact of that also on air quality and on carbon emission from transport through to reports as well, and essentially that's also a kind of a picture of continued issues there without action. What we know is that we need to offer people a more competitive alternative to travelling by car. I think the point was made in the Joint Assembly that for many people the car might be the only choice, or it might be the rational choice. So we need something else that people want to get onto instead. So that means more investment in public transport, in cycling and in walking to make those options viable and appealing to people. We've had analysis done by ARIP, which has looked at how you achieve that and suggests 3 interventions. So firstly, investing in infrastructure to improve connectivity, and the paper outlines the infrastructure plans that are already been created for the area. Improvements to services, particularly around reliability, speed, frequency, and also possibly cost. And then finally, a lever that creates more space for those services to run by managing demand for car travel. We've done some work jointly with County Council on the scale of that intervention and the sorts of intervention that is needed that concluded that a substantial fiscal and or physical measure is needed to make that change. And we also know from the work that we've done looking at other places that it's important that that comes together as a package and that it's phased appropriately as well. And this slide is just kind of to point to you, because I know we gave you a lot of appendices for this report of kind of work that had been done. So this is just the work that relates to what I've just said. So a key piece of new work that's presented to the board in this paper is the Future Bus Network Concept report that Sistra undertook for us. And this looked at what the improvement to bus services needs to look like to provide that competitive alternative to the car. And it looks particularly at kind of the situation now, but also where we're going to see growth, both in terms of residential growth and employment growth in the future. And it looks at 3 categories of improvement. So the first one is about lengthening the operating hours and standardising the frequency of the service, and that's around kind of building confidence in that core network. The second category is about enhancing the core network, so particularly providing more orbital connections and faster services where that's possible. And then the third category is about improving rural services, so having a more frequent service that connects better into the core network, so that people can get to where they need to go to. If this network as a whole was implemented, it would bring almost 500,000 people within an hour of one of the key employment sites, and actually some of the employment sites see a bit of a bigger jump than others, so another 45,000 people would be within 30 minutes of the biomedical campus, which, given the growth there, is something that would make a big difference. The report does look at a range of delivery challenges for this network, so it looks at kind of how costs might be impacted by the move towards using more electric vehicles. It looks at the impact of space constraints within the city and how the additional buses needed to operate this network might need to be accommodated. So just as a rough calculation, the additional buses equates to about 17% of cars kind of needing to come off the road to accommodate that. It also looks at costs, which are dependent on fares and recovery largely. So the costs that are in the table here are the gross costs. If recovered through fares a similar amount of the upfront cost as Transport for London does on their bus network, it would mean the network as a whole would cost around 17 million a year to operate. And this work is also feeding into the Combined Authorities Bus Task Force that Ian mentioned the work of earlier. Just kind of going back to an earlier slide, talking about how we need better public transport, cycling and walking, and that needs more space and ongoing revenue support. Much of the rest of the paper is looking at what measures enable that to be secured, and we know from that earlier work that these need to be significant. So what the technical work has done is looked at a comprehensive range of options, drawing on lessons from elsewhere, and it's also looking at some of the work that we actually have ongoing already in the city, such as the Spaces and Movement supplementary planning document, and also projects that we might be able to learn from, such as the Mill Road closure. We've done some modelling around the main 2 types of intervention, so kind of physical changes, so strategic closures to roads, which do have some local benefits in terms of journey times, but can cause displacement elsewhere, versus area-wide benefits, which create a much bigger impact in terms of number of cars, but do lead to some increases elsewhere. Similarly, looking at fiscal options, road pricing and parking pricing, this has been tested, and it's been tested as an area-based charge rather than a kind of cordon-based charge. People coming in. There's quite a lot of detailed findings in the paper on this, but probably the key ones just to draw out is that, broadly speaking, road pricing is more effective than parking pricing at reducing traffic options, and that in the morning peak, as you can kind of see from the graph here, all the options apart from £5 parking charge would bring down the level of traffic in the model by around or more, whereas in the PM peak it's only a £10 all day charge that is shown to be bringing the traffic down by that level. We missed your skip. So this again is just the papers that the reports that refer to that evidence that I've just talked through, so you can reference it there. Another key piece of new work is the baseline and scoping report for the integrated impact assessment. So this is the first stage of the work on that. The integrated impact assessment brings together several issues. So they're listed there: equalities, economic, environment, health and community safety. And by doing it in an integrated way, it means that it's not just looking at specific impacts, but also at cross-cutting impacts as well. So the bit of work that's been done is preparation, really, which defines the baseline against which any future proposals could be assessed, and also sets out the assessment approach. It also makes an initial assessment of the different measures, and it's just important to note that they're assessed individually rather than as packages or combinations. So it will help to inform the next stage of the work and help to inform thinking around potential impacts and mitigations in any next stage of the work. The last section of the paper looks at phasing and implementation and makes the point that any plan will need to be phased, and think of a key message that's come through from the board previously and also from the Citizens Assembly is that public transport and alternatives do need to be in place first before kind of any restrictions start being applied. Some of this has already started to happen in the city. You know, the City Access Project has brought forward actions previously, and there's a recommendation that more kind of short-term action is taken. Any plan in the kind of medium term will need to be a package of measures, and we'll need to look at not just the core individual measures, but also what enhancements and mitigations could be used. And there are a lot of choices here about what level of intervention, what measures are used for that. So the paper gives 4 recommendations for the board. The Joint Assembly put forward recommendations which is set out in section 3 of the report, and the board asked officers to ensure that elements of this were reflected in the paper. The first recommendation focuses on the public transport network and using that as the basis for future work to identify how that uplift in public transport could be delivered. The second one notes the technical work, but then is recommending developing a refined set of packages that provide options for different levels of intervention. So taking together all the work that's been done to date and looking at issues around different cost levels, around kind of take-up of electric vehicles, and you'll see some of the points from the Joint Assembly recommendation reflected in there. The third recommendation is around immediate intervention. So that is the measures set out at paragraph 12.4 in your report, and it's recommending that those options are prioritised and implemented. And again, taking the Joint Assembly's point about them needing to be consistent with a longer term strategy that encourages more journeys to be undertaken by public transport, walking and cycling. So that was really all I was going to say on that.
Good. Thank you very much. It's very helpful indeed. Before I ask for comments, I think I'd like to invite Tim Rick and Helen Valentine to give some further feedback about the Joint Assembly. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Chair. When this report came to the Assembly, and incidentally I think all concerned believed it was a remarkably good collection of important evidence and data that was being brought to us all in one place at one time, and that was really great. But one of the concerning things was that it didn't come to us with a recommendation, as such reports normally do, and that was worrying, because I think members of the Assembly do care about it. In actual fact, the absence of a recommendation, I think, gave quite an important opportunity, because it actually enabled us to go back to what we, as members of the Assembly, all individually thought. I proposed the recommendation that is reported in your papers at the bottom of page 36 and top of page 37. And I did that after consulting with every member of the Assembly and capturing their views. And those views did say that this is important and we should get on with it. The essence of what I wanted to say really to the board was the same as I was trying to say to the Assembly when I proposed this. This area of our policy on congestion is really central to what we had the city deal for. And I am in some position to know about that, having been one of the people negotiating it. We were trying to improve the transport system in Greater Cambridge, given it's already heavily congested and overloaded and is facing a massively increased population making calls on it. The idea that congestion was therefore not a part of what we were supposed to be doing in the GCP is really absurd, because the congestion is simply the other side of that overloaded transport system that we struck the city deal primarily to help to resolve. Secondly, this area of our policy, the city access area, is essential because it joins up all the other schemes that we've got in the pipeline. All the schemes that are improving radial access for public transport to the city, all the schemes that are improving cycling facilities in different places, all of them would raise the question, so what about when it all comes together in the city? How do we manage that situation? And so this is not an isolated project that we're looking at here. This is something that is and needs to be considered as completely interdependent with all the other projects that we are looking at. And so we leave it out and we put it in the slow lane at our peril. Thirdly, there is a sense of urgency about this, and people can look back in history books and say that we haven't grasped the nettle in this area for 15 years, and there would be a lot of truth, I think, if you wanted to look at it that way. But when people say that other cities are facing this kind of challenge much more positively than we are, that evidence is contemporary. You only have to look round, and the public questioner made that point very specifically. But if you overlay the sort of the functionality of the transport system, that being the original issue, if you overlay on that the concern about climate change and the concern about air quality, which have become much more bigger imperatives for us recently, then you really can't afford to ignore the sense of the need to get on with this. Fourthly, and that's what I think was the big discovery from talking with Assembly members, is that I think we feel that we do have a substantial consensus on this, on what should be the ingredients of a package. It's always difficult to put it in a few sentences, however, but I think it's about a much improved, cleaner, subsidised public transport service, supported both financially and in generating road space by a demand management regime, both together providing the possibility of reallocating more public realm to walking and cycling. And that, I think, is visible in the recommendation that was passed in the Assembly. I'd just like to say a few words in my own right about what I think that means. This recommendation came unanimously, and as Tim said earlier on, that also came with every single member of the Assembly very visibly engaged with the discussion. Everyone contributed to the debate. It's no easy thing for a 15-member body with elected representatives from 3 political parties, representing 3 councils, sitting with representatives of our other partners in business and higher and further education, basing their views on what I've said is the impressive evidence in front of them, which also included extensive testing of views within and beyond our own footprint from the public, and listening to the views of the Citizens' Assembly, which we've just had replayed. In a very meaningful sense, I think that Greater Cambridge has spoken on this now, and it's spoken with one voice. Although there's clarity of direction in what the Assembly agreed, I think it would be absolutely wrong for me to suggest that everyone has a resolved view about what the eventual package of measures should look like. There are, I think, still a spectrum of views on that in the Assembly, but what it does mean is that those 15 people have agreed to be persuaded by the evidence. That is how I think we've got to this point, and it's been a struggle, but that's how we think that this thing should proceed from now on. And we may not proceed to convince everyone of the evidence, but I think that people in the Assembly have said, let's follow it and let's see what we can produce here. But there is a lot at stake here, and too much, I think, for political gestures. I have to be straight here, like offering up a motion to your council to rule out options, as we saw at the County Council, before we've got any options, and asking members to vote on that without any understanding of the evidence that members, I think, in the GCP have invested really very heavily in, thanks to our officers. It makes much more sense to work together inside this partnership rather than pursuing letter-writing campaigns and side meetings and private discussions and bouncing arguments between organisations. We created this partnership to capture this debate, and we should really let it play out within this organisation. This is a subject on which we definitely do need a robust plan. It's been kicked into the long grass for many years. The list of implications is extensive and reinforced by people who were with us earlier on. The local economy and the livelihood of people depending on it, the quality of the public realm, safety, health, air quality, climate change, social inclusion, equalities, and the list probably would be longer. Those implications are not private implications for people living in Greater Cambridge. They're implications shared by people going there for work or study or recreation or shopping or access to public services, whether they live in Greater Cambridge or not. These are things that have potential benefit for many people, any people who want to come to this city. So, Chair, I just wanted to say that when I was thinking about this board meeting coming up, I was rather hoping that members of the board would be asked to vote on the recommendation actually that came in its raw form from the Assembly. And I think it carries a bit more punch than the officer's version. But I do get the point. I've studied what's in the officer's recommendation very carefully, and I think that if that is the means by which we take this forward, and if that secures another unanimous vote today, then I think it's definitely something that I would encourage the board to vote for, and hope that we can actually look at something that does look more like options when the whole GCP cycle resumes in the summer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. Helen, would you like to say anything?
I'll be very quick because both teams have pretty much covered the ground, but I wanted to, in a sense, reinforce the fact that the clear majority of the GCP Assembly is impatient to get on with this, supports the Citizens Assembly view that we need to be bold and that things are urgent. The clear majority of the GCP Assembly feels that as part of the mix we are going to need a revenue stream. That revenue stream is probably going to be through a charge. It might possibly be through workplace parking levy, which I agree has perhaps been slightly undersold up until now. And I think the public questions today reinforce the impression that I have that if we don't watch it, we are going to be behind both the public and business on this. People have shifted a long way since I was first involved in the Assembly. We've already heard that lots of cities around the country are also moving ahead faster than us, and we pride ourselves as being on the kind of leading edge of these things, and if we don't watch it, we're going to end up as laggards rather than leaders. And therefore, in summary, I guess I'm urging the board to pursue all options, not take anything off the table, because I do think somehow we're going to have to get a revenue stream as part of this if we're going to get a step change in public transport and modal shift that we require.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you to both of you to come along and share your thoughts on this. Before I invite other members of the board to speak, I will just share with you the comments that Claire Ruskin sent on public transport and city access. I support the recommendations and particularly believe that we must have all the options on the table for comparative and transparent analysis. We cannot remove options for assumed political reasons. So, Lewis.
Thank you. So, and I appreciated both the introduction by Tim earlier on and the 25 paragraphs, which I hope will be carried forward by officers, because I think there's a fair range of insights in those, as well as the overall conclusion. And I would have been happy to have voted for the motion that was agreed by the Assembly, and I do completely support the view that was established, which is that we have got a really good community of spirit between the different people that are on the Assembly and the board, and this is the kind of issue that Greater Cambridge needs to sort out with the input from the County Council, because it's right that we represent that wider geography, but it has become more urgent in the time, and the challenge is how to look at the controversial or the difficult choices, as well as look at a whole range of measures which I think we have been delivering on, like the Chisholm Trail, like a number of measures. So that's where I do fully support the short-term measures and actually distilling that into changes in the city centre, a parking strategy for us, and I hope that the county councillors don't resist our work on residence parking schemes. Residence parking schemes, a whole range of issues, car-free days, a whole range of initiatives. So I'm just obviously we've got it in the recommendations, but I think we've got to put some edge into the proposals that come forward in June, July, and I'm sure that there's quite a lot that came through from the Citizens Assembly on that. So there is really so let's just deal with some of the easy issues. On cycling and walking, I don't think there's any opposition. On reconfiguring the city centre, clearly there are some access issues, and Tim, as a market ward councillor, would have a big say in that. But we can make a big difference in the way cars do manage to get into the city, and we could reduce that. And obviously there's measures like last mile deliveries and a whole range of aspects. So I would hope that there's a package in that area that there won't be contention about, but I think we have to be careful in that, because if we're putting money into those areas, and I know I've heard some rightly some concerns about, if you add up all of the tariff of the measures that we're looking at, it's a lot of money. And if we're starting to intervene with bus services, which I think we should, given that we've now got more response from Stagecoach, and I'd hope that we do it in a way that is innovative, with lollipop buses or hoppers or so on, because the Stagecoach double-decker bus isn't the only answer to the city's transport or problems. And when I say the city, I know that on the whole thread of bus services, we have to go out through South Cambridgeshire and out into the wider region. And we have to look at this as being a 10-year plan, because were we to get the Cam Metro, it's still going to be, the central section is no mean undertaking. Crossrail to a number of other projects, these are not simple, as well as there isn't yet any source of funding for it. So I completely agree that at the centre of this, as has been said by people from the Assembly, that identifying an income stream is the missing link. If we don't get the missing link fixed, we're not in a position to make the short-term bus measures turn into real long-term change. So we do need to look at those, but I think that the trick, not a trick in one way, but trick of saving ourselves another grinding 3 years is actually to try and distill down during this year 3 options, 2 or 3, and work out between us 1 or maximum 2, because we have to keep moving. So we have to identify an income stream, but we also have to reduce the number of 2-metre times 3-metre metal boxes that block the buses. So it's no good just pouring money into funding buses if we don't actually reduce the number of cars. So I was really cheered up by the fact that there was unanimity on the Assembly. And I appreciate that there's differences of views, including in this building that I sit. But we do have to get over that, and we really do have to come up with this, because we have an awful situation, and the air pollution is awful in parts of the city at times of the year. We're not alone, there's dozens of British cities that have it, but it really is a health epidemic on the way. And as we've been reminded by those that would interrupt us and end our meeting, we need to tackle climate change, and that this is a big part of it, because this isn't something where human beings in Cambridge have got a choice. We are the people that need to give them that choice, and that is a real responsibility. So I support the recommendations that are in front of us. We do need to have 2 or 3 working models, because I don't think we've really explained to people what the options involve. And I don't think until we bring a couple of the charging options to life and look in fine detail, I mean, I know it from talking to colleagues, I know it from talking to people on my street, they really don't understand these issues. And I think what we haven't done so far is to actually make them clear. So how would a charging option on cars or a charging option on parking work? How would it work in detail? I appreciate the comments of the public speakers, and clearly, as people have said, this is the biggest challenge really in this agenda. To me, apart from traffic and tackling transport, along with affordable housing and having places for people to live, this is the issue that could bring down the quality of life and just the nature of living in Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. So we have to bring those to life, and I would like to really look at Nottingham and the workplace parking area and what it has as well. But we have to reduce the number of vehicles. So I appreciate all of the work that's been put in, the work of the Citizens' Assembly. I thought this was to date the finest hour of the Joint Assembly. Obviously it's got more to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Phil?
Okay, well, I'm not a politician, so I'm going to be brief.
I'm a politician and I will be briefed then based on that, Phil.
But the other reason for being brief is that I agree with everything that's been said so far. We have to listen to the Assembly. We have the evidence. We're an evidence-led body. I think all options should be on the table, including how we generate income to pay for some of the transport options going forward. The only thing that I regret is that we seem to be taking our time to do this, and I understand the reasons for it, but we are not just an evidence-based body, we are a delivery body as well. And we have to get on and do some of the delivery. That's why I particularly regret the Cambridge to Camborne scheme has been taken off the agenda. I think that was an example of where we could have moved forward and started to deliver some transport options for the city. So I support the recommendations. I think we should be moving forward on a range of options. I think we really need to get on with it.
Short and sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Ian.
I was going to address my starting point to Vincent actually. It is actually, you may not be aware, but the Cambridge County Council is looking at doing 2 schools which have not been identified yet, okay, to run a pilot along the lines that you have suggested in your question. Okay, so my suggestion actually to yourself actually, I don't know which 2 schools will be coming forward. I think it's a matter of some discussion with education staff about talking to the heads and the school governors about which is the most appropriate. There will be 2 in Cambridge coming through on the trial. Okay, so just make you aware that decision has already been made and passed. Okay, so if I just sort of perhaps turn to the report a little bit. In essence, some answering the other 2. It's 3. There's 3 partners here. Okay, therefore that's not easy. We've got 3 political parties within the room. Okay, there will be some points that we will all agree, and there will be points where we will disagree. In the emphasis that we place on individual things. So, in answer, I think and that comes back a little bit to what Lewis said, is maybe it's time to actually pick the ones which we all agree. Those are the quick wins, and then you can actually cross those off the agenda. So that's perhaps my starter for 10. I also went to Nottingham some years ago, I have to admit, to see about the workplace parking levy, and of course it was introduced there for a particular reason. And I think we all realised it was to actually bring in the tram that they've got. I think it perhaps time some of the things you said, perhaps I need to be brought up a little bit up to date because things may have changed. When it comes to raising income, there are many ways of raising income, and it's not always about charging the motorist. So there are other things that I've read that you can actually raise income. Workplace levy is one of them. I do support the recommendations as laid out on the paper. I think there is still a lot of work to happen. If you look about what the Citizens Assembly said in about closing roads, maybe that is something that we could all agree. Which roads? I think we will, in the report talks of Silver Street, and I'm sure, for instance, there are other roads that we could easily identify, and that might be more of the quick wins that we would perhaps wish to progress, which hopefully will develop quicker rather than some of the other more difficult decisions that we have to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we've had some extremely strong messages from Joint Assembly, from the Citizens Assembly, and from some board members about the urgency of action in this and how we need to be bold. We've also got some really good evidence on public transport, on some of the options to do with what we do with the roads. I think and we've also got consensus on many things that we can do. I think possibly there will be some further work to do on working up some of the options in a way that people will start to be able to understand how it will actually function, what the impact will be on their lives, and us from a sort of political point of view, thinking through how that will play out, which I think will help. So we, despite not being able to adopt as is the Joint Assembly recommendations, we have got consensus, I think, on the recommendations before us. So I think we can now turn to those. There is one small point on important, small but important, yes, on paragraph 4, recommendation 4 on page 36. It should refer to paragraph 12.4 rather than 10.4. So paragraph 12.4 in this report, as opposed to the Joint Assembly report, lists the short-term measures that we are asking officers to work up and then come back to us. So, just going through the recommendations, we are mentioning the work on public transport and agreeing to use this for work on how we can actually implement a really significant change in the public transport provision. Then we are looking at some of the aspects of the improvements that we want to make. I mean, looking through in a lot of detail at some of these things, so that then we can have sort of complete the evidence on these issues. So that's points 2 and 3, and then yes, then working them up into packages of the sorts described by Lewis, so that we can actually understand how they actually affect us. And then finally, we are agreeing to implement the short-term measures, although obviously some of them do need more work before they can be, we can actually proceed with them, and there will be some need for prioritisation of them, both in time and cost. So then I got the impression from the discussion that everyone's content to use block. Yes. So taking them all together, yes. I think we can agree those recommendations. Thank you very much. Yes, it's for the heckling to the floor. Yes.
Yes,
I've tried that in meetings before.
Can I just make a process point as a resident of South Cambridgeshire, that the title that we give this project, the City Access, kind of great, because quite a lot of people coming to work are accessing growing employment sites which are on the periphery of Cambridge. There are students who want to access the sixth form colleges, which are also on the periphery of Cambridge. There are patients who want to get to Admiral's Hospital, which is on the periphery. So that a lot of this is not so much about getting into the city centre, but about improving connectivity in general from the outlying areas to the destinations that people want to reach.
We've got a suggestion rather than bringing us a problem.
I'm sorry, I don't have a better title, but if you collectively put your heads together and come up with something that is easier on the ear, for those of us who live outside Cambridge, that would be really interesting.
It is a public transport and movement strategy for the whole of the Great Cambridge area, which we will think of a better term for it.
I have suggested that at some point in the future, but it escapes me at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll come back to it. Thank you very much. And thank you.
Can I just? I'm being a pedant, but I'd like to have a clearer expression of.
Right. Okay. Yes. Right. So, so on these recommendations, if you could indicate whether you support the recommendations.
I don't have a vote, but
well, you could indicate support. Yes. Thank you very much. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you. And thank you everyone who came to intervene on this subject. Yeah, thank you.
My GP has prescribed certain I can move my ankle around and not the weight on it. So actually, the good thing is like
was it me or was it just?
Yeah, we'll come back. It was just suggested early morning.
Yeah. Okay. Once again, also work out whether the police need to be.
Yes.
Right, okay, I think we're settled now. So we are now moving on to greenways, page 78 of the report pack. First of all, we have public questions, another one from the cycling campaign. I think, is it Roxanne, are you going to answer?
Yes.
Yeah, Alice, thank you.
From here, okay?
Yes, if you project.
Excellent.
Good.
I can do that. Okay, it's Roxanne from Cambridge Cycling Campaign. We're pleased to see the proposals for the greenways and the request for additional funding, and we hope the Executive Board will support these plans as the greenways cannot arrive a minute too soon. Question 1. In light of the climate emergency, we ask the Executive Board to consider what steps could be taken to speed up delivery of the greenways sooner than the proposed date of late 2024. Question 2. In another project, the GCP has proposed removing all car parking along Adams Road. Somewhat. Given that this is a desirable safety feature on its own, may we ask for the removal of parking and additional cycling-friendly traffic calming on Adams Road to be included as another quick win project that can be implemented straight away to increase cycling safety on one of the busiest and most important cycle routes in Cambridge. I'm expecting that might just be deferred. Question 3. With the relocation of the County Council officers and the cycling projects team, and some members of this team leaving, what specific plans does the GCP and the County Council have in place to ensure the greenways and other cycling projects like the cross-city cycling schemes will be staffed by officers with experience in cycling projects and with the local knowledge required to design them? And just keeping in mind that Cambridge is quite unique in our levels of cycling that we need to provide for, and those skills may be hard to find in other parts of the country.
Good, excellent. So, thank you very much. So, question 1. Could I hand over to Peter?
Thank you, Chair. So we conversed at the Joint Assembly, and I'm going to say remarkably similar things to them as you would expect. So the timescale of the greenways is intended to be realistic, largely predicated on our ability to access land, which is the thing that takes time. But I think I accepted the challenge around the sense of urgency in terms of getting on with it, and if we can bring these things forward in delivery terms, we will do our level best to do that. We did discuss the Adams Road, and my answer at the time was we're not pursuing greenway quick wins at the moment, we are pursuing greenways. There will be a report later this year regarding the Comberton Greenway and how it relates to Cambridge. We will pick up at that point once we consider that in the round. And then I think finally you squeezed out of me the commitment that there would be local expertise and local knowledge would be employed as we develop these schemes. And we're in ongoing discussions with Ian and colleagues at the County Council to ensure that happens.
Thank you very much, Steve. So, do you have any anything else to kick off the report?
Well, just to briefly summarise, because the report does 2 things, Chair. One, when we've discussed the Greenways project with both yourselves and the Joint Assembly, you've both made clear that it's a meaty project and we need to do this in manageable chunks, in part to deliver certainty around timescales of delivery. So we've done that by effectively coming up with a little bit of a running order that's outlined in 5.1. So we've assessed in terms of cost, benefits, deliverability and the like. That is purely in order in terms of bringing them to you. That's not to say there's a priority or we're not doing this or that. It's purely in terms of deliverability. So that's outlined in Appendix 1, the sort of the batting order with the 12 greenways. Top of that, the batting order at the moment, Waterbeach and Fulbourn. And so what the report then covers is bringing forward the public engagement that has taken place to date, the technical analysis, outline proposals, and then with the commitment that that ongoing consultation and engagement will take place as we develop these schemes going forward, Chair.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. So any comments on the greenways?
Not to add there.
Phil?
Just I share some of the frustrations on
delivery and progress. I mean, again, we are a delivery body, we are delivering on Histon Road, on Chisholm's Road, etc. Let's just get on and do this.
Good. So I just had one question. I'm not against there being several routes, but what's the how does the Waterbeach Greenway fit with the intention to have in the later report a presumably a cycling and walking route along another public transport route to Waterbeach?
Yeah, I think the idea was that they complement. We are looking at significant growth in the Waterbeach area, and we want as many opportunities for people to use sustainable forms of transport to get in from the Waterbeach area to North Cambridge and beyond.
Thank you. Particularly, a cycle we could, alongside the busway, could end up in a very different place to the Greenway.
That's right.
So
yeah, well, so do I assume that there'll be some differentiation in location rather than one sort of a couple of 100 metres away from that station?
You could make that assumption.
Okay, even though you haven't made any decisions.
Even though we haven't made any decisions.
You haven't made any decisions.
Oh, you have?
No,
all right.
You're the decision.
We don't make decisions, but not
well, all right. You make some decisions in writing reports, which then we make decisions on.
That's right. And so they clearly need to complement, not duplicate, or be marginally different. Marginally different is not complementing. They need to complement.
Okay, so there is a different. There's a clear distinction and added value, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry if I belaboured that one.
Thank you. Ian.
Okay. I mean, I think we agree Greenways is the right project, like it is actually on the Chisholm Trail and building the bridge. So the answer actually is I think we're all on the same agenda here, all three organisations, as you are aware. So maybe the frustration, I think, somebody feels frustration and sometimes mine as well, actually is about delivery. I guess it's almost, some cases, feel best advice is never get elected. Don't stand. Okay. Don't worry. Because it is, as Tim well knows, it is an issue for us. What we're trying to do, of course, is to manage the project, because to actually deliver 8 greenways will cause quite a bit of disruption and quite a lot of work. Okay, so delivery is always an issue. They aren't always as easy as they might first seem. Particularly if you get into land issues in respect of landowners' issues and compulsory purchases and things of that nature, and they can take longer than lots of us would like. Okay, all I just say is we are committed. We have been committed in the past. We have done a lot of cycling projects without GCP money as well, mostly from central government when we put bids in, and we will continue to do that. I'm content with recommendations.
I'm not suggesting any of them should be called the Burkitt Trial, because I don't think that Francis quite merits Jim's recognition, but nevertheless we should pay tribute to what Francis Burkitt put into this.
He did. You're quite right. Thank you, Lewis, for that.
I think Councillor Bosby wants to interview.
Yeah, in fact, picking up on that last point, and this came up again, well, it did come up at the Joint Assembly from one of the public questions, but also it came up at the big debate yesterday evening in the Corn Exchange, where one of the representatives of the British Horse Society made a plea that could we please pay attention to the type of greenways that these are running through the countryside, and that quite a few users will not be on 2 wheels but will be on 4 hooves, and the surface needs to be carefully suited to their needs as much as to those of cyclists and pedestrians.
Certainly in the Waterbeach one, there's a grass verge along the side of it.
Yeah, and so we did take a question at Joint Assembly on that point, and I've subsequently met the Horse Association to discuss how we take this forward.
Yeah. Okay, right, good, thank you very much. So yeah, there's 2 things we're deciding on. One is the prioritisation of the schemes, and then the other is the first 2 schemes. So we have there's 6 parts to the recommendations with letters. I think we can take them on block to prioritise them, take those decisions, and then obviously crucially approve the purchase, approve the use of CPO powers to get the land, if that is necessary. Hopefully not. So, can you indicate if you support these recommendations? Aye. Thank you very much. We have unanimity on those recommendations. Thank you. Good. On to, thank you very much, Roxanne, for coming along to that.
Oh, we're on the agenda again.
You're still on,
Happy to leave.
So we've just got one more. Right, so we've got, we're starting off this item. This is the quarterly progress report. We've got 2 public questions, another one from the cycling campaign, and then one from somebody who's on their way. So, are you asking this one? Yes. Yeah, do you want to ask this one now? Or we're waiting for Sam?
I didn't know if you were going to make it with...
Hold on 2 seconds, let Sam get in settled.
Were you able to watch on the screen?
Yes, it's working digitally.
Oh, good. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So we have our first question from the Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. My name is Matthew Danish from Cambridge Cycling Campaign. We noticed that on the transport delivery overview, the links to Cambridge North Station and Science Park project is marked as completed when on the ground this route is unfinished because the issues of Nuffield Road have not yet been addressed in front of the school, for example. Similarly, although we do welcome the improvements to Arbery Road last year, absolutely, we note that this is not yet a safe cycle route because the southeastern end of the road is still very dangerous for people cycling and walking, as an earlier public question raised in another agenda item, I might add, from the Arbery Road Residents East Association. Question 1, can the Executive Board confirm that there will be investment in a second phase of cross-city cycling projects, or a project to complete unfinished routes and link up safe sections of existing or proposed cycling routes? For example, addressing that gap in safe provision between the new section of Arbery Road and the proposed Milton Road cycleways that will presumably be go under construction sometime in the next few years. Question 2 is, what were the results of the surveys that were undertaken in areas of cross-city cycling schemes? Was there an uptake in people cycling? Do people feel that these routes are now safer to cycle on? Question 3, are all these schemes connected to the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, or LCWIP process, and a comprehensive plan for cycling networks across Greater Cambridge? And when is the LCWIP consultation going to be launched? Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question. Sam, would you like to ask a question? It's probably easier if you come forward. Then so the microphones are in the middle of the table there, so project in that direction.
Okay. As the board will be aware, there is already significant public scepticism about the biomedical campus's ability to manage its growth without significant further detrimental impacts on the residential communities in the south of the city. In March 2019, I asked this board how the GCP proposed to convert the 47 short-term interventions identified in the Biomedical Campus Transport Needs Review into, quote, distinct funded actions with identified accountability and appropriate monitoring processes delivered within an acceptable timeframe. I note the statement in item 22.3 in today's board papers that work has only been undertaken on, quotes, around half of the potential so-called quick win measures, and the statement in 22.5 that CUHP will not even have finished the plan for the delivery of appropriate campus-wide governance structures before March 2020. Hence, I'm here today to ask this board whether it is content with the progress that has been made in the intervening year, and whether it sympathises with residents' frustrations as they experience the intensifying negative externalities of the campus's growth.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Again, another excellent question. Are you going to take them? Or
yeah, take them in the order they came, if that's okay with you. So, Matthew, thanks very much for your question. I suppose helpful just to clarify that the planned Greenways projects all build upon the cross-city cycling schemes to improve cycling across the broader geography. And actually, just to specifically address your first question, the GCP's future investment strategy, I'm not sure if you've engaged with that particular document, but it does identify delivery of further cycling projects to address some of the gaps that you've outlined in the network. That's as part of a long list of potential future projects. And actually that's subject to further funding being made available as part of our gateway review process, which is, we are told by government, due to be complete by the end of this financial year. And investment in any kind of second phase of cross-city cycling would be considered on that basis, essentially. And just your second point on the surveys, I'm glad you've raised it. There's some fairly positive feedback from those. So on the independent evaluation of the 3 cross-city schemes, and the cycle counts as well, it found that there was an increase in the number of cyclists by about 12% across each of the 3 routes, and roughly around 1,500 more cycle trips per week throughout the period of the survey work. And just on your question about safety, the independent evaluation found that perceptions of safety along the routes, it had improved, with an average improvement of about 24%. So pretty positive feedback from that. And on your third question on the LC WIP, indeed all the schemes are connected to the LC WIP process. And as far as I'm aware, Cambridgeshire County Council intend to launch the LC WIP consultation this spring. And Sam, thanks for your question, just to come back to that. So I guess the first thing to say is that the GCP absolutely acknowledges the kind of economic and societal benefits that this place is gaining from the CDC, but we are aware of the challenges that those things bring with it in terms of traffic and transportation. Indeed, that's why we undertook the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Transport Needs Review last year, which I think was actually the first comprehensive study of its nature as far as I'm aware. And actually, indeed, because of that, we are asking the board to continue to work with the campus as part of the report that we're just about to deliver to the board. So I think the key message is that we want to work constructively with the campus, we think they want to work constructively with us, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Sorry, can I just add an addendum to that? What you may well have seen on the big screens was the decision brought up earlier on around what we're currently calling city access, but we may well be reviewing the title in terms of looking at both the short-term and longer-term packaging measures, and clearly the CBC transport situation very clearly within those, so we would expect some proposals to come forward as part of that work as well.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So back to Niamh for the report itself.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I guess other than the recommendations that are in front of you and you'll no doubt by this stage be familiar with, I guess I just wanted to draw your attention to page 76, where we talk about our progress on skills. I'm always trying to plug what we're doing on skills, but what you'll see on the table on page 96.
96.
Excuse me, 96. No, I'm not taking you backwards, don't worry. So on the table there, just to point out that we have now exceeded our target on apprenticeships. We have a target of 420 as set out in the original City Guild document, and we hit, as of July last year, 481, so the figure is likely to be more significant than that. But there is good progress across everything we're doing on skills. Again, as set out in section 8 and beyond, the newly launched GCP Skills apprenticeship service is going well, and they're beating their targets so much that I'm wondering if we set them targets that were a little too easy, so we'll work with them to refine those. But other than drawing that out, Chair, just available for any questions or clarifications.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Lewis.
Well, as we've been asked to approve the budget for the year, I just wondered if we could just get an update on the changes
Yeah.
What page are we on? Sorry.
Page 117.
Thank you.
So we go through any. Sorry, just get my page number
Because
right.
we've gained figures for the outline cost of the north public transport route and the east one. So I'd just like to know what those figures are based on, and some of the other numbers have changed in there.
As in the third and fourth line.
So on those lines, just small numbers, 52.6 million has arrived for the north route and 50.5 million we now have for the east route. What's the basis of those numbers?
So the basis of those numbers is the further work that we've started to do on both of those corridors, reflecting our knowledge and understanding of the respective costs of both the Camborne and the South East Counterpart biomedical campus costs. Previously, we hadn't put any budgets or any technical work in for those in terms of development and construction because they were considered in the sort of phase 2 or the sort of the future investment wave to
That's future investment strategy.
So effectively what we're now doing is to say that we've committed to do these schemes. We are developing them, and the next 2 agenda items cover the sort of the initial steps on that. And what we need to start to do with you is to bring you the associated cost of what those schemes will look like going forward.
Okay, so as I've achieved some success there, try again. There's one number that I'm just not clear, the West of Cambridge package, that's a sort of very loose term, the 42 million there. There's the FIS allocation, public transport improvement, 75 million. And then there's this number for energy, 25 million. I just appreciate knowing more about those three.
We could work backwards on the energy one. It's that's 25,000 just for this year. The future years budget.
Sorry, those are not in the same numbers as above.
So there's a future years budget, which is, as you say, 25 million. So 25k for the next financial year is to do some, is to essentially...
Sorry, £25,040, yeah?
So that's the entire budget, £25,040. We are.
The penultimate column is the 2021 budget, though, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So the very second to last column is the next year's budget, which is the only thing we're asking you to approve now.
Yeah.
So next year's budget is to look at essentially what the problem is on the network, to understand what we need to do and what interventions might be available. That's likely to go towards some sort of consultancy support. The initial work that we've done, the initial work that we've got back on the project, suggests that in order to solve the problem, there is a gap in funding of about 25 million quid. Hence the kind of the potential allocation for future years' budgets. We won't be able to confirm that until the work that needs to be done next year has been carried out.
And it would come back for a full business case evaluation. It's not an allocation.
I'm not proving spending 25 million. I just think I want to be clear what we're actually agreeing and what is indicative. Is this 25 million indicative?
Yes, so all we're asking you to agree at this meeting is that...
I'm just confused in the way that's not how... When we present budget numbers, they're actual budget numbers.
So they are for this. We're only asking you to approve the budget for this financial year, not for future years.
Okay.
But if that's unclear,
clear in the minutes that future years' budgets are provisional and subject to further reports.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Lewis.
Yeah. Well, thank you. No, it's all very informative. And while I'm speaking, I welcome the small amount of funding towards the Housing First Units modular construction at Christ the Redeemers. I saw the sites being marked out with flags. I've met the people that are making them in Waterpeak, so it's got a Greater Cambridge project this morning, being made by a social enterprise in Waterbeach, and it really is important to have more housing that homeless people can move straight into, provided that the right support is there. I then want to just ask about the CBC. I had a lot of scepticism, and I expressed at a previous meeting about the lack of cohesion between the people who are involved on that campus. Given that we spent a small fortune on the feasibility work and the study, and I'm disappointed to get the impression that things are really not moving. And I just want, I'm not happy at the amount of money that we've spent if we don't follow it up. And either, what's the polite way of putting it, pressure the main employers to actually get moving, because I fear that because everybody only looks after their own patch, they aren't helping. And this transport study, obviously in terms of its impacts on neighbours, but just in actually coming up with sustainable travel plans, does require, does require my judgment, a far greater commitment and staffing. It needs people to drive this forward. If they don't have the right people, it won't happen. It'll just be all talk, and it's been all talk for 5 years. So I know we don't take direct responsibility, but we did spend a fortune on the transport study, and we raised a lot of expectations. And of course we're going to have hopefully a Cambridge South railway station, but this is already moving towards 25,000 employees, plus a huge number of visitors, and all the patients and their relatives.
Phil, did you want to comment on this particular one first before I come back to you?
Yes, and again, I share the frustration about progress. There has been established a Cambridge Biomedical Campus Strategy Group and a Cambridge Biomedical Campus Programme Board to take forward this and the future development of the campus. It's a very early stage. I'm on the programme board, but you're right, there are a number of stakeholders. They're not working as close together as they should. Consultants have been taken on to come up with a series of proposals around governance, but the chief executive of the Cambridge University Health Partners has left, and there's a recruitment process.
Sorry, who's left?
The chief executive of the Cambridge University Health Partners. And there's a recruitment process going on to find a replacement for him as well. So I can't say that it's going anywhere fast, but it is going somewhere.
Chair, can I just add, so in page 114, then what that page starts to do is to outline, we've broken down some of the key deliverables, and we've outlined progress to date. And some of these things have clearly been picked up. Some of them there's been some partial work, and others there is more to do. But I would link it back to the answer I gave to Sam earlier on around your previous decision you've taken on short-term improvements. So things like exploring short-term improvements in bus services, which was a key pillar of the CBC report. We need more bus services there. We give people the alternative.
Does that include a Babraham-Trumpington service?
Well, that's something that in terms of the sister work was
Babraham Road, sorry.
Babraham Road, and we would without prejudging what may come to you in coming weeks and months, I would suggest it's quite likely that gets picked up in those proposals. We're already in discussions with county colleagues around extending the park and ride side of Babraham. Clearly there's a process to go through, and I know you'll hear me bleating on about acquiring land and planning permissions and the like, but they are processes we need to go through. So there is work going on with the partners on the site. Some of these things we will be able to achieve in shorter order, and some of this I think will be picked up by the decision that you made earlier today.
I mean, I'll just come back on this point of staffing, Peter, because I know that these kind of, well, some might say that the Greater Cambridge Partnership came together when we got a decent cohort of staff. And similarly, I just think there's just that resource issue, which there's so much flux, so many people coming and going, so much self-interest at times that unless there's the gel, we're just going to come back. And so I would, Chair, ask if we could bring this issue back again, because our next meeting's not until June, at the next meeting, just to see where it's at in the progress report.
Yeah, happy to do that, but I would also point you to that prioritised table in Annex 1, because it's less than a year since the study was bought, so what was asked for at that time was that there was a prioritisation of activities and delivery had started, and within the quarterly progress report on page 103 and 104, it is self-assessing that there are some challenges and the governance issues that Phil refers to are part of that, and we are working with the campus to resolve those issues and make sure the resource is there to deliver it. And as Peter says, some of that will then play into our wider strategy too. But we're on it, and the campus is on it, and we are working closely together to be able to deliver on those priorities that were identified.
Okay, no, I appreciate the work. I just know how critical it is for transport to in and out of that site to be twice as sustainable as it is now. And a lot of the things on the list are really good, providing that somebody actually does it.
I think there were two questions that Lewis asked earlier that we didn't answer actually from the finance table. So you asked about the West of Cambridge package.
Off message there, yeah.
But
so yeah, I was interested in the FIS.
And the future investment strategy.
So again, Need gave you the answer, the general answer, which is you're focusing on the last but one column, 2021. And so in terms of West of Cambridge package, previously agreed park and ride site, get on with it, and acquire the land. So we're hoping that the 4.7 million this year will include concluding the land deal, and that the 1.8 next year will be the planning application that will go in imminently, and then the further detailed design that is required to follow that. So what you're not approving is the 30 odd million beyond that. And if you do recall back, the West of Cambridge package wasn't just the expanded park and ride facilities, it was also then reviewing Trumpington Road and what we were going to do to squeeze the particular core down that pine pot in terms of encouraging further public transport, walking and cycling along a fairly congested main corridor into the city.
And the corridor we haven't really looked at yet.
Which is why we've set aside some provisioning some money to do it.
Okay.
Sorry, again.
No, that's right.
Just similarly on the FIS. Again,
what is FIS?
Future Investment Strategy.
Thank you. I'm not a jargon person, and neither are the public.
You're quite right. We'll rectify that. You're not being asked to approve a budget for the FIS. That's an indicative allocation for future years against public transport improvements. As and when we get news on the gateway, we will be revisiting the future investment strategy, and we'll need to refine that for next year's budget and beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll go back. Matthew, I will bring that the attention to the cycling team here. Good question. I wrote down one word actually, saying was no. Okay. I look forward to Phil's intervention as he sits there. So I'm not going to add anything more. I did cross my mind before Phil spoke to ask somebody to write to the chief executive, but I think with Phil's on being on the board, that will not necessarily be necessary now. I do actually agree with Lewis. I'm afraid to say the budget paper is not what I normally see. Okay, and maybe we need to perhaps work. It's not consistent with how councils, all three councils, I suspect, present their reports. Okay, and maybe there's time to actually.
Maybe for next year.
Do better, I think, if they would. Your school report, David. Okay, you're listening. Maybe something you'd like to actually pick up with Sarah, please, because I think we could do a little bit better on the budget, and I think we should discuss it a little earlier in the process and bring it forward occasionally, not every meeting, but occasionally rather than at the end. Maybe at the
half year.
Yeah, maybe better to bring it forward occasionally as a recommendation.
Thank you very much. Good, thanks. Just a couple of quick things for me. I also went to see the housing units being built in Waterbeach, and they look really good, really nice design, nice and spacious, and yeah, easy to move around, and good model for similar projects. And also I've been a bit involved in the apprenticeship stuff, talking to From the Future's representatives from the Future, was it last week before, and it's really good at having had a little explore of the site and some of the options, some of the opportunities that they're bringing together. I think it's really good, good work. Thank you. So we have a set of recommendations, 6 recommendations again on page 91, noting the programme, approving the pilot on these 6 temporary housing units. Noting the CBC transport study, approving the continuation of the funding for park and ride sites, and delegating to the Chief Executive to procure some legal advice on getting the powers for the transport schemes, and then overall approving the 2021 budget. So is everyone, if you could indicate if you're happy with that?
Yes, please.
Good. Again, we have unanimity on that. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So at this point, we would be about halfway through the meeting, but today. Is everyone happy to carry on? You want to pause for a minute?
Yes.
Yes. Keep going. Yep. Good. Okay. Yep. Well, thank you very much for.
We're on a 3-hour, 20-minute roll.
Yes. Well, we've been making some good progress. Okay. Yep. Thank you for coming. So next, on papers, so we're now moving to item 11, which is page 161.
Thank you.
Which is initiating the Waterbeach to Northeast Cambridge project. We have no questions on that. If you'd like to just start us off, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, really quite quickly, these next two reports were described as innocuous earlier in the meeting, and they are simply update reports. Because of the meeting cycle, they are both going to come back to you in the June meeting. This is simply to give you awareness that we have started informal public and stakeholder engagement, both on the Waterbeach corridor and on the Eastern Access corridor. What will come back to you next time round is further detail of the technical analysis and initial consultation on both corridors. We will be seeking to consult Waterbeach over the summer. A couple of reasons. One, because we want to tie up in the point that was made earlier on regarding the Greenway, so that these things are delivered hand in glove in terms of our considerations. And secondly, because the Eastern Access fits better in the autumn period with the local plan. So we're talking through with the Director of Planning at South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City. He would much prefer that we consulted on Eastern Access in the autumn. So essentially, this is just a general update on both corridors to say we're in discussions. You may well hear from stakeholders that we're in discussions with them. This will come back to you formally in June on both accounts to consider a consultation on next steps.
And those consultations will include some options.
It will be optioneering, so it's effectively where we're at now is there is a consultation as part of the strategic outline business case and a consultation on the outline business case. This is the SOBC consultation, and they will form part of the developing that, which the outline business case will come to you in due course.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Any comments, Lewis?
At what point, therefore, will there be? What will the shape of the geography be at the next stage, Peter? And is it right to assume that there will be somewhere near the bottom line, the southern line, a starting point, and somewhere near the northern line a finish point? Or is there still some uncertainty about whether the route is going to cover all of that geography, or just
We should have greater clarity on that, but we won't have a final decision. As you're aware, and as our constituents are continually interested in, we go through a process of sifting, so we rule things out. before we get to a route alignment. The detailed route alignment consultation will take place as part of the outline business case, not this business case. So what we'll be looking at is just those sort of questions. Where really do we need to be considering starting and ending what, particularly in terms of water reach? The challenge on the route is around the southern sections, because we have the interplay between Cambridge North Rail Station, the Science Park and the Northern Fringe East development. And what we need to make sure is we come up with a public transport walking and cycling offer that makes sense of that, rather than just coming up with a random sort of ending point. And then ultimately, as this would move into a tunnel section with aspirations for the CAM, that we make sure we're cognizant of that as well. So my question, I think, will be clearer on it following the consultation. We won't get a final decision.
So is what you're saying that in terms of the timescale, there won't be a consultation on a route or a narrower corridor until early 2021?
Yeah. But we will only do, unlike previous major projects, we're only doing 2 consultations, clearly linked to strategic business case, outline business case. So there's a very clear narrative for stakeholders, because the public gets confused when we consult, particularly if we are not clear what we're consulting on. So the first bit, it's the principles, it's the understanding, it's what are the building blocks. The second bit is what are the real route alignment options.
But on the southern end of it, Chair, there must be an attraction to linking into the existing fast public busway. And some also, given that I'm not aware that there's been much focus in some of the combined authorities' work on these existing 2 routes of St Ives and Trumpington, some major upgrading on the busway as well?
I think both of those are real questions. The other question that comes into play is the location of Milton Park and Ride, and whether that, looking forward 10 or 15 years, whether that's in the location we wanted it or not.
Okay. But it's in Greenbelt, presumably.
Yes.
So it isn't suddenly going to acquire any value, but you've got to find another site.
It's not about value. It's about the location as it relates to those 3 key destination points on the southern end of the route.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, in answer to Lewis, that's actually the work on the busway actually is connected to the A14 improvements. It's Highways England's work that we've had to accommodate.
Oh, well, I wasn't thinking, Ian, about the temporary work. I was more thinking if
yeah. I thought that's
we're working on 2+2 routes to ensure that we've got fast public transport effectively through the green zone of South Cambridgeshire, linking into the edge of the city. So I was more interested just in, without necessarily having a clear answer at this stage, but at what stage is there going to be some review about how does that route get upgraded so that it's part of a network?
So we're not
that it isn't doing a great job already, because its usage is getting up to 4 million from 3 million journeys a year, and that is a major achievement.
And there are real linkages in this location. So we're not asking that question today, but we will need to answer that by the time we get to an outline business case that we present to you.
So by 2021, there will also be a plan for an upgrade.
This is the business case, this is the route alignment, and quite probably, but I don't want to speculate, that there needs to be some interrelationship and
linkage and how that route is going to work.
And obviously working closely with the county
council. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, my only real request actually is on both of them really actually is to engage, because when you look at Waterbeach development with the possibility of the station being relocated with section 106 and the work that is being done by South Cambridge and Transport, it needs to be joined up in what we're consulting on and be quite precise, because you're quite right, Peter, people will get quite confused about precisely what we're talking about, what somebody else might be talking about. And the same applies, I'm afraid to say, to the eastern one. When you look about Cambridge Airport and the development around there, land Cherry Hinton and Collins Lane and the wing development, I think there's a real risk of it, what I call being quite confusing to precisely what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why somebody else isn't doing it or something. So the coordination is what I'm more concerned about on both the projects with the planning authorities and the transport authorities, etc. And bearing in mind that the local plan is, you know, started, it needs to be quite timely as well in that respect.
Yeah. Yes. Chair, again, thank you. Just in terms of comments, I mean, certainly that this North Route is vital. At the moment, we've got gridlock around that A14, A10 junction, north and south. We need to get the science park off its fix of cars, and we need to bring forward what has been scored in the A10 study as the far higher scoring cost-benefit improvements which are public transport. So if there is the funding, which is completely uncertain from the combined authority and government to dual the A10, this will be essential. Otherwise, we'll have traffic chaos at that roundabout. This report underlines the importance of getting this section of public transport moving quickly, because roads and more cars coming north and south are not the answer.
Thank you. Tim?
Yes, those who know me well will be aware that I'm passionate about community engagement and public participation. And one of the lessons maybe that we have learned from other consultation processes is that towards the end of the process, where it comes towards making an actual decision, a lot of residents come back to us and say, well, when this was first proposed, we weren't told that it was going to come past our door or whatever. And this is a difficulty that we face in the process, because at the strategic outline business case process, which is what we're about to launch, it's a slightly more vague question that we're posing to members of the public. And somehow we need, in the consultation exercise, we need to get that point across that initially this is looking at the principle and the potential ribbons, but down the line there will be a route alignment that will come out of it, and somehow getting that across early and ensuring that the fullest possible understanding from the start, I think will be essential in easing the process towards the end.
Chair, if I may, I think that's absolutely right. And so part of what we're doing here is talking in advance of consultation, so we can start to bring people up to speed with what the issues are, what the process is. So we have 2 steps to come up. So people are far clear. So when we go to consultation, we don't have to go through the process of bringing them all up to speed. We've had conversations. This has proved quite successful with some of the local schemes within sort of Histon Road more recently. There will still be differences of opinion, and we're still going to get people who don't like whatever the final solution will be. But the process is far cleaner and far easier for people to engage with and understand. And that's the reason why we're going through this slightly revised process.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more comments? Good, thank you. So we are, as I say, just noting the work, endorsing the plans for public and stakeholder engagement to begin, then with the plan to bring back in June more details for public consultation in the sort of summer, late summer, early autumn. Okay. Everyone agree with that?
Agreed.
Good. Thank you very much. We've already started talking about the next one, which is the Eastern Access Project, page 167. I don't know whether you want to actually...
No, not really. I mean, almost just to echo the points that Ian raised around the complexity of these things. If anything, it's a little bit more complex in the East, because the strategic planning perspective is not as clear, and that's one of the reasons why, working with Stephen Kelly, Director of Planning, he would rather this went a little bit later in the cycle, so we push this back to the autumn. But this will come back to you in June for formal consideration.
Good. Thank you very much. Any comments on this list?
This looks like the kind of project which we can do some work on, but all of a sudden will be a huge public row. And I am concerned that it's very vague. And for instance, I would need to record my opposition to routes going across either Coldham's Common or Stourbridge Common, because those are rare and precious green spaces in this zone. So I would want this, if it's, and I'm happy to take it forward, but I just think we really have to get the communications right on this one, because there's a severe risk that people will assume from the diagram that some kind of magical solution can be found that starts at the Elizabeth Way, Newmarket Road junction, whereas my expectation of where significant improvements above ground can occur starts more like where the car showrooms are. And I'm just concerned that we have to communicate this one very carefully and openly, because there could quickly be a rumour mill that there's going to be some kind of above surface route all the way along this geography, and it really is so constrained that whilst it's a big area to look at, there isn't really much that can actually be done, particularly on the inner city end, unless it's radical and reduces the road space. So the other one I can see having clear communication. This one, it really does need to be that way. And I have in the past raised, just as an example, options of looking at how we can make much better use of the east of Cambridge rail route out to Dullingham and Newmarket, which is working to capacity at the moment, even though they've radically increased the number of carriages, I think from 1 to 3, still not enough. So I just urge some clarity about ambitions, objectives, constraints, so that there is a sensible engagement, and I don't have to start telling people I will be out there with banners and placards.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure we've registered that. Thank you very much. Okay, so no further comments. We can return to recommendations, which are on page 167, which is again to note the work to date and doing a strategy with the plan to do some stakeholder engagement now and bring a consultation toward in the autumn. Yes, so with a report coming back to June. Is everyone happy with that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yes, thank you very much. Then we have Whittlesford.
Thank you, Chair. So another short report that will come back to you later in the year. You're aware of the work that's gone on at Whittlesford, producing a sort of a master planning exercise on the transport and the infrastructure. We've gone through that process. We've gone through a public consultation process. We're clear on what the realistic options are, but there are a number of delivery partners, not least the rail sector. So what we want to do now is work with key stakeholders to finalise the plan and get something that's tangible and deliverable before we come to you and say this is what any investment might secure. The one change that for this report, from when it went to the Joint Assembly to today, is with helpful intervention from the County Council regarding decriminalised parking, in terms of taking that forward separately with South Cambridgeshire. So I think those conversations, if they've not already started, are about to commence. I'm sure they may well come back to us in terms of implementation costs, but that's a matter for another day. So the civil parking enforcement will be taken forward by the two statutory authorities. What we want to do is to get on, agree a finalised delivery plan, and then come back to you later in the year with this is what any investment might buy in that location.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any comments? No. Okay.
Good project.
Yep, good. Thank you. So we've got the recommendations on page 174. Note responses and support the drafting of a delivery plan that we will do more engagement on and come back to us. All agreed on that? We agree. Okay. Thank you very much. So that's the last
Next meeting, Chair, can I I mean, it's not possible, given that we've still to meet the Mayor after our efforts to meet today didn't gel, to say when we'll be coming back to discuss the Camborne and Cambridge route, but we presumably we can have a special meeting.
Yes, there's nothing to prevent us from agreeing or
with appropriate public notice, including as we've got at least 20 people want to come and ask this question.
Absolutely, yes, there will be plenty of attention when we do, but for the moment I think we can just agree that we will have our next sort of normal meeting on the 25th of June. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, just a couple of brief things. Just thank you for all the officers, some of whom aren't actually here.
Huge thanks to, I mean, it really is important that we were able to meet and do our democratic duty, because we're not here to get blocked by people who didn't even want to listen to us or and have answers to their questions. And we were discussing the Citizens' Assembly, which is the issue that they've been championing.
Can I just say, actually, can you go out through the main entrance? Okay. As you normally do, I think, anyway. The protesters have gone, I've been informed of that, but just for in case anybody's still looking around a bit, so just go out the hall. Keepers may still be down there.
Did it all end peacefully, do you know?
We finished the meeting just...
Yes, we have finished.
Yeah.